Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Blue Dog Whisperer. This is I want to say, the third episode that I've made since I started the relaunch of my podcast. And I am so proud to have a guest on. His name is Tanski. Did I get that right? Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, that's good.
All right. And tell us a little bit about who you're representing today or who you're with and what the subject of our podcast is going to be.
Yeah, so I joined up with my statewide forward party chapter, and I'll be talking about that today.
And the Forward Party is very interesting because you know, I'm not a big believer in third parties, but I think that it serves a very important purpose because the Ford Party is run by Andrew Yang and Christy Whitman. And Christy Whitman was our former governor here in New Jersey, since I also live in New Jersey like you. And what do you think the message of the Ford Party is? Because I think that you and I have probably have different political ideologies in some capacity, but yet
Yeah,
we're both intrigued by this movement.
yeah, absolutely. So I think I mean I agree with you that I'm also not like a huge fan of third parties, but I think the Ford Party is the only third party, maybe not the only one, but the third party that prioritizes meaningful and practical democracy reform, and so that third parties are a lot more viable and they meaningfully challenge the duopoly. I think there's a lot of independents out there that just don't like Democrats or Republicans for a variety of reasons, and the Ford Party sets out make to set the stage to make a more fair and more and better representative democracy. Um, as it stands, there have been some people running as forward candidates, but that's not what I'm interested in, and it seems like consensus here in New Jersey, as well as that a priority of ours isn't to run a forward candidate, but rather to function as a political action committee, like a PAC, to push for policies that can set the stage for third parties and better democracy reform.
Well, one of the things I think of the Forward Party as, and I'm not sure how much you'd agree or disagree with it, I almost think of it as a problem solvers caucus for the people, where people of all ideologies and political parties who are kind of fed up with how the political parties have operated in some capacity come together to share ideas. It's a party of ideas, and where we talk through our disagreements and also find common ground. That's kind of my impression of it. I've been to a couple of the meetings. What would you say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. Uh, the Forward Party sets out to reach out to conservatives, libertarians, Democrats, people on the left, people on the right, people in the center, to try to come together and talk about the problems that they have in their specific states or nationally. But I think Forward Party is very focused right now on like the local and trying to push for those like statewide policies to try to keep up that for one ranked choice voting momentum for sure. I think that's kind of its priority right now.
Well, ranked choice voting is a very confusing thing for a lot of people. And I will say that I think that definitely for presidential primaries, we needed ranked choice voting, especially, because I don't know about you, but during the 2020 Democratic primary, I really like Joe Biden, but I also like Michael Bloomberg. So had we had ranked choice voting, I probably would have ranked it Biden first, Bloomberg second. So uh, could you explain to my listeners what ranked choice voting is, just so they get a better sense of what it is? Because it does make a lot of sense from a statistical standpoint.
Yeah, so essentially, um, all that would be changing for the voter. All that they would have to essentially worry about is um, uh, ranking, just essentially ranking their favorite politicians that are on the ballot. So yeah, like you said, if you like someone like a lot, you can put them first, and then you're like, well, this next person is not too bad either, and I can put them second, and same third. You can go all the way down the ballot, and it essentially uh, ensures that that the candidates that the most people want um, get better get that position. So, uh, for example, um, a lot of the candidates lately have been or at least people have been perceiving as very polarizing. And if like, for example, um, there's like 45 percent of the vote for a Democrat, Republican, and then um, uh, uh, for like a third party candidate, you could add or you could um, sorry, sorry, I'm getting a little I'm so essentially how it works off is like in the Georgia runoff right now.
Right. That's a
Um, yeah, right now, this whole runoff could have been bypassed if it had ranked choice voting. So when you have so once like once if there's no candidate that doesn't hit that hits 50%, um, it starts taking in like the second ranks of all the people until someone hits 50%.
Right. It
Um,
basically averages it out. And they did that in Alaska too. And Alaska, for their House of Representatives, they have a district at large. So, for those of my listeners who may or may not know, that means that there's just one congressional representative for the state of Alaska since the population is so small. And as a result, I mean, no one hit 50%, but as a result, enough people uh, voted or placed not Lisa Murkowski. Well, Lisa Murkowski did win, but like for the Congress, a lot of people placed the Democrat Mary Peltola as their first or second choice, whereas a lot of people placed Sarah Palin as their first choice. But Sarah Palin wasn't really on one second or third choice. She was either first or last, and as a result, it averaged out, and the Democrat had enough votes to proceed. And it does not only affect Democrats for the better. Maine also, I believe, has ranked choice voting, and Susan Collins won easily with Maine's ranked choice voting. So it doesn't necessarily benefit one party or another, doesn't benefit incumbents necessarily. It all depends.
yeah. Some of the outcomes that I do like is that it's in some areas it's shown to decrease legislation polarization, so that like you don't see like Democrats and Republicans fighting so much about like should they or should they not vote on a certain bill. Um, it's encouraged more people to come out and vote, especially young voters. There's like a 10% increase in ranked choice voting compared to our single choice voting system right now.
Mhm.
Um, so uh, also people are more satisfied with the campaign process and the democratic process. Uh, uh, Ranked choice voting studies have found, and also that the campaigns generally are more positive. That candidates are more willing to uh, uh, not be so mudslingy and more focused on like what they are going to do instead of saying how horrible the other person is. That's what something interesting that I found with that. And
It's interesting. I had never heard that before, but it makes sense. Uh,
yeah,
I did not hear a lot of drama happening between the race with Susan Collins in a couple of years ago and her Democratic opponent. That was supposed to be a pretty competitive race. It was more competitive than all of Collins' other races, but it I think the system works pretty well, especially, and I really think that it's needed for primary elections too, especially primary elections, because there are a lot of people, and we'll get to this in a second, but there are a lot of people who may wanna vote for a couple people because they really the thought of not voting for them in the primary is just unbearable. Some people are very indecisive and they want to
yeah,
be able to express the nuance and all that. So I totally get what you're saying.
yeah, for sure. Um, and and ranked choice voting is one of our kind of three flagship policies. We also support open primaries,
Yes.
which I think is a great idea. I think that's something that could also reduce polarization and radicalization in the campaigns. So, like for example, if a Democrat finds a Republican running in their primary to be too radical, they could vote against them for the more moderate Republican, and vice versa for the Republican finding a Democrat too radical and voting for the more moderate Democrat. Um, Essentially, uh, what these policies set out to do is to try to get try to better achieve majority consensus on policy in a more efficient way.
Hmm.
So another one of our flagship policies is independent redistricting commissions. So essentially, I think we're both aware that Republicans have gone um, pretty hardcore on the redistricting, and they're doing it in the favor of their own party instead of doing it in the favor of Americans, and how their communities reflect how their communities should reflect, their districts or their population. So the idea is to try to get that partisan bias out of redistricting.
Well, people have said, and I totally agree with this, and I've been to a couple of the four-party meetings here in New Jersey, because a lot of districts in the United States are drawn so favorably towards one party or another. In a lot of districts, the primary is more competitive than the general election, and I don't think people realize the significance of that. That when on average, a lot of states have closed primaries, so you're already excluding a lot of people from making the very important decisions if they don't subscribe or want to subscribe to the Democratic or the Republican parties, at least on paper. And secondly, um, a lot of people don't even know when the primaries are. I mean, and we're talking about making the election day a federal holiday, but what about the primary election day? That's kind of an interesting thought because each state has a different primary election day, and I think that would be best handled at the state level for obvious reasons. But just the fact that there are some government agencies that do close for the general election day, but I don't think they really close for primary election day. So you're kind of it really makes the pool more shallow in terms of the voters.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. That's not something that we've talked about a lot that I've found, but I think a lot of us would agree that trying to get trying to make voting easier is important to democracy reform. I personally love early voting. I think early voting is a great idea. Um, why have just one day where we have to all have to go to one place and vote? We should extend that to weeks beforehand.
I
Uh,
totally agree.
yep.
It's a lot of states did it before New Jersey did it, which is interesting. And thank goodness Governor Murphy decided to make it a reality. And I think that it's possible that the COVID crisis taught us that the less people we have in a room at once, not just for health reasons, because I think the pandemic is coming to an end, at least in terms of the really severe part, but also, you know, why should someone have to wait in a 6 hour line to cast their ballot when you can break it up across a week or two and make the polling places uh, you know, make them small, make the occupancy smaller, but the same amount of votes going in, and maybe even more. If people are busy on election day, they can vote the week before. It really
Yep.
opens up options for people.
Yeah. Absolutely. Um, of course I'm all for mail-in voting as well. But like I said, whatever makes voting easier for people, I think is the ideal.
Now, I don't want to be too partisan, but why do you think there are a lot of Republicans who are so adamant against mail-in voting?
Um, I mean, well, I'm probably we're probably in the same realm here. I wouldn't like identify with like the kind of as like a centrist. I probably more identify with the left personally. Um, so I'm more comfortable saying like, I mean, I think Republicans just uh, they know that um, Democrats have that advantage because Donald Trump campaigned on distrust towards these kind of institutions, which I don't agree with. I'm a fan of our institutions. I think we should always be trying to improve them. Um, and uh, yeah, I mean, that's that's what it seems like to me. I mean, there's a case to be made to say like there's can be errors or whatever, but then how we fix that? More funding. We need more funding for our election, for our polling places and things like that, in our election process. So, I mean, I don't even know if Republicans agree with that we should increase funding to that.
Well,
But I mean, if they are, then we're in agreement.
I've heard that some Republicans have said that it's too easy to cheat or interfere, but I'm like, you do realize that a computer can be hacked, like those computers in your polling station. I mean,
Yeah,
no system is immune from interference, unfortunately.
yeah, um, yeah. My thing is, I don't see it as like a widespread problem. I think it's a problem that we should address. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and say we shouldn't fix our voting errors, right? Like, of course, we should try to always fix our voting errors. Um, I just don't. I think Republicans make it out to be something that's a bigger threat to democracy than it's necessary than necessary.
And I propose that I support voting ID laws, but what I've also said is that if someone truly is not able to obtain a photo ID, they have a social security number when they register to vote. Or maybe what we should do for everyone is like we should literally have their photos in the voter database so that we can match the face with the name. Whatever works and whatever secures elections. There is a compromise in a middle ground here, because I do support voter ID laws, but I also support exceptions and whatever makes instills trust within the electorate, but also increases voter turnout. I think that's very important.
Yep, yeah, for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, the voter ID stuff. Yeah, I mean, whatever is most pragmatic. I'm not like we're going to have some sort of voter ID, right? Like because you can't just go in Pennsylvania and vote, right? So, yeah, I would, yeah. So, uh, though the risk is like having too strict voter ID laws lower the um,
Yeah,
could lower the amount of people that could vote. But yeah, like you said, I think we agree here that whoever voting ID laws can help get people out to vote more. I agree.
well,
Um,
yeah. What were you saying?
oh, I wanted to make a separate point, but if you have another thing to say about this,
One example of the voter ID law that I felt was unfair in North Dakota a few years ago was they actually mandated that you have to have a conventional address on your ID. The
yeah,
problem with a lot of Native Americans, because of their tradition and the way they do things, did not have the conventional address. So I felt that was a voter ID that was a way of telling the Native Americans stay out of our elections, and I thought that was not fair or right.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I agree. I mean, Native Americans have historically been marginalized by not only our market systems, but also our political systems. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what were you going to say earlier?
Oh, yeah. Some of these, I would say, some of these positions are unique to me, but the four. I just wanted to just to make sure that that everyone knows that the main positions of the Ford Party are those main three policies, and everything else that like all my other like I would consider myself a progressive. All my other progressive beliefs are independent of my support for the Ford Party.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's great because I consider myself a radical centrist, but what I like about the Forward Party is that even though I'm a centrist, I think that both extremes and both parties have their good ideas and their bad ideas. But I also really like to focus on the good ideas because I think there's a lot of there are a lot of good ideas on the progressive left and even the conservative right that I think the Forward Party kind of bridges the gap to some degree and gets the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite progressive ideas?
So I mean, one of the reasons I can't deny it, that I was turned on the Ford Party because I was a fan of the Andrew Yang in the 2020 election. I am a huge supporter of universal basic income. I just think it makes a lot of sense. I've done a lot of research on it. I think, especially, I mean, all over the country, but in New Jersey, I think a universal basic income would be extremely helpful for somewhere like where I live and probably where you live. it seems like there's kind of like this ghost townification uh, happening where like for me, I'll drive down my street and I just see um, car dealerships, just all car dealerships, and it's like it doesn't feel like there's life in this town. Uh, um, and I think what we need is more investment from the ground up. Um, so something that universal basic income does is that it supports small business. It increases consumption. People have more money to spend in more places, and it gives people more capital to start their businesses. Uh, and gives them and also decouples money from having a job. So instead of someone who has to work 60 hours a week uh, to make ends meet, they have that universal basic income. They can work less and they can focus on more of their passions and focus on things like starting a business or honing in their skills to get a better job. And I think these are all positive aspects to like the South Jersey economy. Like I think all these things would all these things would uh, increase the standard of living for everyone, and it's kind of just it seems like a something that could build up like a trajectory, like a um, so, something that could build up to like something that like we could be thriving, like all could be. It seems like a almost like utopian a little bit because essentially we're setting the stage for people to thrive instead of just having to work all the time uh, at a job that they don't even care about. Um,
Well, that's pretty
uh,
interesting. You know, if I had it my way, because I have mixed thoughts about universal basic income. I supported Andrew Yang not for president but for mayor of New York. I thought he had some great ideas, and I also supported Curtis Sliwa for mayor for several reasons. But one of them was I liked that he was entertaining Andrew Yang's idea of universal basic income, which I thought was very ballsy for a Republican. But
oh yeah,
I think big cities like New York could really use the universal basic income. Even South Jersey, especially like with the boardwalk culture, I think that could make a difference. But I would say,
absolutely.
if I were in charge, I would say to the Republicans, I would say, okay, we have two choices: either universal basic income, or we raise minimum wage so that people don't have to work as many hours to make money. I mean, I'd be comfortable with either one, honestly, from a local level and even a federal level to some degree. At least with the minimum wage, like the minimum wage has been kicked down the road for so long.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also a fan of that. Whatever gets more money in more people's hands, I think is a good thing and helps our economies thrive. I think I personally think there's a lot more pros to universal basic income. So I'm more I'm in more support of that. But yeah, absolutely. And New Jersey, which I love, what's something I love about New Jersey is we've been on top of that stuff. We've had a lot of progressive legislation, and something I'm proud of my state for. Not to say that I don't have other problems like the cost of living here, but yeah, um, um, I'm all for that kind of progressive legislation to try to reduce poverty, essentially.
It's very important, and that's I mean I think we have a lot of great politicians here in New Jersey. I'm a pretty big fan of Governor Murphy. He's someone who I think I could see running for the Senate or even president possibly. I don't know. I see him going places. I think our governor's done a very good job.
Yeah, um, especially compared to uh, Chris Christie. I mean, Chris Christie was kind of a little bit of a disaster. I mean, I'm a little too young to remember what it was, but I know he was kind of like a he was kind of like our version of Ted Cruz almost.
I think Christie's more likable than Ted Cruz, and I actually think Christie did some good things as our governor. I mean, obviously, I don't like him as much as I like Governor Murphy, but I like that he expanded Medicaid in the state of New Jersey. I like that. What I like about Christie that I couldn't say about other Republican governors is that he didn't push his religious views or like the moral values onto us. He was true to the constituency while still remaining true to his political views, and I like that about Governor Christie. But obviously, I think Murphy has been a friend to the middle class a lot more than Governor Christie was.
Yeah, I mean, I can agree with that. But even Jeff Van Drew, who represents my uh, uh, what's it called? My district, and you campaigned against him.
I've
If I
campaigned against
recall
him
correctly.
twice. I worked on Amy Kennedy's campaign in 2020.
Oh, great! I love
I
Amy
worked
Kennedy
on
as
Tim
well.
Alexander's campaign. Both great people. I really wish that they. I mean, obviously, only one of them could have beaten Van Drew. I mean, but either one of them would have been far better than Van Drew. Yeah,
Yeah, I agree.
yeah.
But his voting record is surprisingly moderate.
Weird because it's moderate in some ways, but I don't think moderates by and large vote against certifying the election results. Like I just can't get past that one.
Yeah,
I'm a
I'm
moderate.
not definitely not saying he's perfect, but
Yeah.
uh, I'd say he's better than a lot of these kind of more radical Republicans who just see Joe Biden legislation and vote no. And that's something that when I look at Republicans, that's my biggest frustration is that they are so partisan that they will uh, make conditions worse for their constituents, and that's something that really fuels like my kind of anti-Republican feelings. But I'm always trying to push against that and be like, I need to be more partisan. I need to be more bipartisan, and I need to understand that working with Republicans is possible and something that we should strive for.
Oh, I agree with that. I mean, 12 Republicans in the Senate voted to pass marriage equality. That was unheard of 15 years ago when a lot of Democrats were not for marriage equality. I never cared about gay marriage. I've always been a supporter of it.
Yeah,
Love. I mean, and I think that that's, as my father would say, that's something about our generation, you and me, that we actually had an influence on the older generations with this marriage equality issue because we had friends who may have had two mothers or two fathers, and it just became normalized with this generation, and I really like that.
yeah. I mean, I'm in a lot of LGBT like circles. I'm LGBT myself, um, and yeah, I mean that's definitely something also that influences my politics too. I mean, it's uh, it's hard to. I mean, I people do it, but it's hard to find um, common ground with Republicans when their legislation that they push for is kind of anti that stuff. It just
Mhm.
seems like they're they're trying to work against us for not really for these kind of moral reasons that we just we just don't identify with, and it seems like the majority of Americans don't identify with.
Well, I've always said when the Republicans say that they want traditional marriage, I'm like, there will always be traditional marriage, even if gay people can get married. That doesn't make marriage any less traditional if you want to marry someone of the opposite sex. So I really don't see what the problem is here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
And also, I wrote a letter to the editor. We're talking about this Republican issue. There was um, there was something to be said for the fact that New York is the reason why the Republicans are taking back the House of Representatives, and it's because um, these Republicans in New York State and Long Island campaigned on the traditional Republican issues, like things that matter to voters: inflation, crime, safety, illegal guns. I mean, I didn't necessarily support these people, but they were good, decent Republicans, and they resonated with the constituency. I mean, who would have thought that Sean Patrick Maloney would have lost his seat? I mean, it's amazing. But just imagine that campaigning not as nutty conspiracy theorists, but on the issues that matter, wins you votes.
Yeah, even here in New Jersey, I was helping out with the Tom Malinowski campaign, and it was definitely disappointing to
Mhm.
um, see him lose out because it was a very close race, and once you see them like go up against each other, it's just like Republicans can complain about these problems, but then they don't have the policy for to solve the problems.
Mhm.
Tom, I would listen to the debate, and both the candidates would just mudsling, and but it would get to the point where the Democrat Tom Malinowski is like, okay, if you have such a problem with inflation and crime and all this stuff, what is your solution? And it's just not what the Democrats are doing, not what the Democrats are doing. I'm like, that's not really an answer, you know.
They know what they're
It's
against. They don't know what they're for.
yeah. So uh, I mean, what progressives and Democrats usually have a consensus on, I think those kind of policies um, actually are um, those kind of policies can address those problems like inflation and crime and things like that. I think more Democrats are in favor of more policies that would solve that than Republicans, which I find ironic.
Well,
Um,
I mean, when you think about it, illegal guns is a big issue. Sometimes the police unions will endorse Democrats because the Republican will be so far out there that they're entertaining the policies of the NRA, and police and law enforcement just don't feel safe with all these guns on the street, especially with these domestic violence calls. I mean, it's really scary.
yeah. Uh, some of my more radical left friends are more pro gun than I am, but I
Mhm.
think there are um, uh, reasonable restrictions on guns that I think a lot even Republicans could agree to.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'm pro
uh,
gun. Also, I think you could be pro gun and pro gun control. Like one
yeah,
of the things is I don't believe in a penalty tax for firearm sales. Like I think that if the gun store wants to charge whatever they want to charge, that's fine. But I don't know how I feel about government making it more difficult for a poorer person to legally obtain a firearm. I don't know how I feel about that. I don't like that.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, that just doesn't scream like logical to me, you know. So
No.
yeah, I agree with that.
It's a penalty tax and it's punishing someone for being poor, especially if they live in an area that may not be very safe and they want to have a gun for protection. It's if they want to do it legally, that's their choice as long as they can pass a background check and anything that is deemed appropriate by the state.
Yeah, I mean, and the poorer you are, the more likely you are gonna run into crime, unfortunately. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Now, my last question: Who do you think the four party, their ideal candidate for a presidency would be? Had a
Well,
guess. I'm not asking you to speak for the four party on this one,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
if you had to guess.
I mean, the easy answer is Andrew Yang, right? I don't think he has any plans to, as far as I know, I don't think he has any plans. But I mean, it makes sense if he was going to run as a Ford Party candidate in 2024. Um, if not him, I could see. Um, maybe a year ago I would say Tulsi Gabbard, but I think Tulsi Gabbard taken is way too far into like the kind of
Mhm.
Republican kind of zone to want to try to focus on like democracy reform.
I could see that.
Um, yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, unless someone comes up as uh, between now and the presidential run, I'm not sure if I see anyone else. Maybe Larry Sharp. I don't know if you heard of him. He
He's
ran for
libertarian.
Libertarian. Yeah, he ran Libertarian for I think New York governor.
Hmm.
But he's kind of been like this kind of progressive libertarian um, that I keep seeing. So maybe Larry Sharp, but I'm if not Andrew Yang.
Well, Andrew Yang
But
is definitely a visionary. I can say
uh,
that.
yeah,
Biggest money
um,
race for
yeah,
governor, not for governor, for mayor.
oh yeah. I loved his something that the Green Party loves too, and you talked about it earlier was his universal basic income, but it was going to be paid by a land value tax, which I think solves another problem that New York has, which is um, unused unused land. Um, the land value tax incentivizes people to build on land and try to make as much money as possible on that land. So that kind of incentivizes like condensed housing, which I think is necessary in New York and New Jersey because we need more supply of like cheap housing to try to lower that cost of living.
I'll have to look into that, but that sounds like an interesting proposal.
Yeah.
Well, I thank you so much for joining me on the podcast. And is there a website or Facebook page that my listeners can go to if they want to learn more about this?
Um, I would say just look up Forward Party on Google. Try to get in contact with your local state chapter and just express your opinion on everything. I I hate that people are kind of getting turned off by this because um it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to work with the other side or whatever, but it's there, it's there to hear you out.
Hmm.
And I mean, I just, if you're trying to get into local advocacy, then I think of joining your local Forward Party um, chapter is a good idea.
Absolutely. Well, I thank you so much, Tansky. Thank you very much for being on the podcast and discussing these very important issues with our
And
listeners. Mm.
yeah, and thank you. This was a great time. I love talking to people about this stuff. I love talking to other advocates, so I definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. I'll see you all next time.
See you later.